Tucson, Arizona. Today we're going to be brewing our lock, stock, and barrel bourbon barrel-aged stout recipe. It has a rating of 4.7 on our website. Am I still muted?
Is the mic muted? There we go. It's working.
Okay, now you're hearing me.
Late response.
Okay, so lock, stock, and barrel is 9.5% ABV. It is one of our highest alcohol recipes on our website. It's got an SRM of 82. SRM stands for Standard Reference Method. This is the system that modern brewers use to specify color. Keep in mind that an SRM of 100 is completely black and you cannot see through it. So 82 makes this a really, really dark beer. It's got 61 IBUs. IBUs are International Bitterness Units, and it's how bitter a beer is. Now, 61 IBUs may seem like a lot because that's basically the low end of an IPA. But this is a very, very malty beer, so a lot of the sweetness from the malts kind of mellow the IBUs out, so you don't really perceive the bitterness. Now, when the beer is young, it will be pretty bitter, but this beer is meant to be aged at least 3 to 6 months. Longer is even better. This is ideal for fans of Bourbon Barrel Stout from Goose Island, Wild Turkey Bourbon Barrel Stout from Anderson Valley, and many other beers. Keep in mind, this is one of our most expensive recipes on our website, but when you actually compare it to commercial equivalents, it's our cheapest beer as far as comparing it to commercial equivalents, because some of those beers can go anywhere from $10 for a 22 ounce all the way up to $50 for 22 ounce bourbon barrel aged stout. And I did the math, and when you're buying ours, you're paying about $6 per 22 ounce bottle. So that's not bad for a bourbon barrel aged stout. Plus you made it yourself. So, all right, so this recipe is going to contain 2 cans of St. Patrick's Irish Stout. And remember, keep in mind that this is a 2-gallon recipe. So it's going to have a lot of malt. I will be doing this in a little brown keg. Keeping that in mind, you want to keep that at a very cool temperature. 65, below 70 is preferable, and you want to put it on like a cookie sheet or baking sheet or in a cooler or somewhere, because it probably will overflow a little bit. This is to be expected. If you're using the 2G Brewmax upright fermenters we have, those are a lot better for this kind of recipe, as is the fast ferment, because you won't have any kind of blow off because they have a lot of headspace. Also included will be 3 smooth LMEs. Now, I did a 6-gallon batch of this when we first made the beer and aged it for a year, and it came out amazing. But a 6-gallon batch, I had to open 9 of these and 6 cans, so it was a pain to do. Also included is going to be your grains. There's going to be a little bit of a 2-row here for some flavor. This will also help convert the starches from the oats, because oats don't have any kind of enzymes, so the 2-row will help that in the steep. And the oats are going to give it a creamy kind of mouthfeel, silky smooth, a little bit of oaty flavor. Munich malt. This is going to contribute to also to some mouthfeel and a little bit of sweetness, and again a lot more maltiness. And these are the chocolate and roasted barley. Chocolate, of course, is going to give you kind of chocolatey notes, hence the name. There's no actual chocolate in this, it's just the way that it's kilned. They call it a chocolate malt. The roasted barley will give you a little more coffee, espresso, roasted notes. And with this recipe, you're going to be getting 4-ounce bags of each of these. You're only going to need to use half of it, 2 ounces for the recipe of each one of these. With that in mind, if you want to do a 4-gallon batch, instead of buying 2 recipes straight out, just buy 1 recipe and then piece together the other recipe without the grains, and you'll save a couple bucks. Not a lot, because grains are really, really cheap, but otherwise you can save the other half for another batch in the future if you wanted to. You could use all the grains in it, but it's a lot of grain and it might make it a little bit too bitter from the roasted barley. And also, because it's so much grain, the muslin sack is not big enough for that amount of grains in it. Also included, there's a lot of stuff in this one. Willamette pellet hops. It's just going to kind of offset all those malts and give you a little balance. It's a real mild hop, so it's not going to add a lot of flavor. A couple of muslin sacks for the grains and the hops. and Nottingham yeast. This is a really hardy yeast. It's really active, and this coupled with all of that malt will probably give you a little bit of overflow, like I was saying. So just keep it on the low end of the temperature scale. If you do have a little bit of an overflow, let it do its thing. It's only going to happen for 12 to 24 hours. Once it's done, clean it all off so it doesn't mold, and let it continue fermenting. Overflows are common in the brewing world, so if you have one, don't panic. And of course, no rinse cleanser. Oh, and I can't forget about the oak chips. This also comes with some American oak chips. It's a light toast, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So as you can see on the kettle cam, I already have some grains started here. Let me turn that. On the thermometer. Right at the top is usually best. 155 to 160 works. This has already been going for about 25 minutes, so we'll give it about 5 more minutes. While it's doing that, I'm going to start sanitizing everything. First, I'm going to get my cans and get those into some warm or hot water so that they come out of the can much easier. And it works so much easier to just cut this with scissors, and these pop right off. So what's everybody drinking today? Nothing? Oh, come on, there we go. Hopefully it's not Budweiser. Although to each his own, if that's what you're drinking, I won't judge. Though I think I just did. Okay, I'm going to toss these in some hot water, because this malt is like molasses, and this will help it come out a lot easier. And I'm going to put my LMEs in there as well. We'll start to assemble our LDK. As usual, keep that rubber washer with the tapered end towards the keg and the flat end towards the spigot. Never ever put the bolt on with any type of tool, just hand tighten it. It helps to kind of turn the spigot on the outside and hold the bolt until you get it nice and snug. Give it a good water test overnight, or a couple hours is best. Fill it up to the 1 mark on the back, which is the 1 gallon mark. If you have our older kegs, it'll be a 4 quart mark. Okay, so the ratio of no rinse cleanser for sanitizing is going to be half of a packet in 1 gallon. This is true for your bottling as well. And it doesn't have to be exact. You can eye it, or you can kind of measure it out if you'd like. I've made enough of these batches that I pretty much know exactly where half is on these. A certain amount of shakes it takes. Okay. Alright, so on top of this little brown keg, we don't use airlocks. We have these notches on the top of the lid, or under the lid, and that allows CO2 to escape. So when you're shaking this to sanitize, you're going to want to do it over the sink, because it will leak out the top. Typically about 30 seconds or so for shaking. I'm going to pour some through the spigot to sanitize the spigot. and then we're going to pour the rest in our bowl. Okay, keg is sanitized. And going into the bowl is going to be our handy spoon. I use a rubberized spoon for what I'm stirring in the keg. I don't scratch up the inside. Your can opener. And if you're using booster or dry malt extract, a whisk is helpful, but we don't have any of that in this recipe. And my tongs. And what else do I need? I think that's it. Super Boyd said, oh, I had my first batch complete last week. It was the Bohemian blend. First time brewing, came out pretty good and had a good head, but it tastes a little flat. Well, that could depend on how long you fermented it for. Or not carbonated, I'm sorry. You want to go at least 2 weeks. 3 weeks is recommended. If you're below 70 degrees, then it could take up to 4 weeks to carbonate. So you might just want to let it go a little bit longer. Alright, we're still in the red, and I think we're about done with that. Okay, so when you're putting the grain in these bags, again, you want to tie it up to the top as close as possible so that the grains have enough space to move around in there. It can be kind of difficult with all the grain that's in this recipe, but with those muslin sacks, and since you're only using half of each bag, it works out just fine. So we're going to go ahead and pull the grains up. Let those drain a little bit. And 1 cup of hot water. And we're going to go ahead and rinse the grains. This step is called sparging. Grains. I'm interested next in a fruit type IPA beer. Yeah, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about using fruit in an upcoming episode. Also, a good fruit IPA, we have one called Dangerously Hoppy on our website. It's really good. It uses tangerines, and I think it has Mandarina Bavaria hops. It's really citrusy. Okay. Go ahead and dump that. Don't squeeze the grain bag. There's no need to squeeze it because that will squeeze out tannins from the husks that can make the beer a little overtly bitter.
Yeah.
Alright, so next thing we're going to do is bring this up to a boil. And let me check the instructions here real quick, make sure I don't have a hot boil. Okay, yes, I will do a 10-minute hot boil. It's been a while since I've made this recipe. But this is my #1 favorite Mr.Beer recipe. It just comes out so good. Just as good, if not better, than some of the commercial equivalents I've found in the stores. If you have the patience and let it age for at least 3 months. I say minimum 6 months to a year for this recipe for best results. That's kind of why we're doing this recipe for you today. I know it's about to be summer and this is kind of a really dark beer, more of a winterish kind of beer. But if you make it now, it'll be ready by Christmas and it'll taste amazing. Great as gifts for family and friends. Okay. So, I'm going to get my hops ready. I think I'm just doing one. Yes, one for 10 minutes. And while this is in there for the hot boil, I'll start talking about using wood in beer, which is starting to become more and more common these days with all these barrel-aged beers, you know, wine barrel-aged saisons, whiskey barrel-aged beers, gin barrel-aged beers. People are getting really crafty, and now, which I think is really cool, is that even some whiskey makers are starting to pick up stout barrels that had stouts that were aged in them, and they're aging whiskey in it. So they're making like whiskey stouts that are kind of, you know, a little darker and have a little bit of the roasted flavors from the stout. I've never had one, but I've read about it, and I'm really interested in trying it. Superboyd said, when you go to that view, you don't hear him talking. Yeah, for some reason the kettle cam was, I think we got it working now. Where do I find the tangerine beer? Go to our website and just look for Tangerously Hoppy. Just start typing tangerine and it should pop right up. What temp should you carbonate or condition? That entirely depends on the beer style. Typically lighter beers like lagers will all beers will carbonate at the same temperature. 70 to 75 is the sweet spot. If you go lower than 70, it could take a little bit longer. Now conditioning or aging will depend on the beer style. Beers like IPAs, wheat beers, things like that, they don't tend to need any conditioning, especially hazy beers, because they don't have the stability as clearer beers do, so they can actually spoil over time. IPAs, however, can lose hop aroma and flavor, so they must be consumed fresh. Lagers, lighter beers like lagers, some pale ales, they're typically conditioned at cooler temperatures. Lagering actually means cold storage in German. So you'll do those at everything else. You can really condition anything at room temperature. It's totally fine. But cellar temperatures, 55 to 65, is the best temperature range for long-term aging. And we are almost to a boil here. So in our recipe, we use American oak chips, and you're going to soak them in bourbon. You could soak it in any kind of bourbon. You could soak it in gin, tequila, whatever you want. Today, I'm not using oak chips. Because I already have some cubes that I prepared quite a while ago. I'm going to be using oak cubes, which will give a little more subtle bourbon barrel flavor. The chips are really better if you're just bottling it, because if you're bottling it, then you have to age it in the bottle off the wood, and the chips are going to provide a lot more flavor. Cubes and staves and other types of oak can be used in primary, but they should really be used in a secondary. What I do with my cubes is when I actually keg this beer, and then I purge the oxygen out of the top, and I add the cubes to it. Well, I add the cubes, then I purge the oxygen, obviously, and I let it sit for 3 to 6 months before I even carbonate it. As long as the oxygen is purged out of it, it should be good to go, and it'll give you a really nice kind of that bourbon barrel-aged flavor. If you don't have a kegging system, again, I just recommend using the oak chips because they work just fine. Slammy Reed just tuned in chat. What did I miss? Not too much. I just got done steeping the grains. We're about to do a hot boil. We're brewing the lock, stock, and barrel bourbon barrel-aged stout, and we're going to talk a little bit about wood. And are we at a boil yet? Yes, we're at a little boil. So I'm going to go ahead and throw these hops in there. These are going to boil for 10 minutes. This adds just a little bit of bitterness, a little extra bitterness, to counteract all of the malt that's in this recipe. And we'll save the other hops for later. So I'm going to go ahead and show you some of the different options. So like I said, there are chips, oak chips. There are different types of toasted chips too. Let me go ahead and pull up my notes here. Alright, so chips are going to be the most common but least expensive way to use oak in your beer. We do sell these in 4-ounce or 1-ounce increments on our website. This is a medium toast, and these are untoasted. You can use untoasted chips. They'll give you a little bit of gentle oak without burnt flavors. But as the beer ages, you lose a lot of that wood flavor. So untoasted chips are really good for if you say you want to add a little bit of wood to like an IPA or some kind of English ale that's intended to be consumed fresh. These are a good option. Most toasted oak is going to be about a light toast, which will give you kind of notes of coconut and a little bit of woody tannins, some vanilla. Medium toast will give you even more vanilla with some butterscotch overtones, and then a heavy toast, which is almost black, will give you smoky notes with some burnt wood flavors. If using a heavy toast, I recommend using it sparingly unless you're doing a really big beer. You could do heavy toast in this, and it will give you a little bit more of that extra flavor. You can even toast your own wood. You can get some oak, and here in Arizona we have mesquite wood everywhere, and I've seen people toast that, which is pretty awesome. Mesquite works really great in beer. Another option would be cubes. These are just little, about 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch oak cubes. Again, these are already soaked in. These are soaked in Bullet rye whiskey. And you have also these. You can get like oak blocks. I know it just looks like a door jamb. They come in block form, and they also come in scaves. These ones are more rounded on the edges. And these are really great for super long-term aging for a year or more. These particular ones are actually inoculated with Brettanomyces wild yeast from a wine barrel-aged Tripel I did a while back that I inoculated with Brettanomyces wild yeast. So I'm keeping these away from any other beers I make because they will infect them. But if you use a weird yeast or any type of souring like lactobacillus, that will stay in there, and you can reuse them, and it'll grow that Brettanomyces of that lacto out of the wood again. So it's pretty cool. Those are pretty much your wood options. There's also spirals, oak spirals. They're probably one of the most expensive options, but they're the best because they have a lot of surface area. It's very even. So with oak chips, 2 ounces versus another 2 ounces of chips, they can vary in their surface area, so they can vary in how efficient they are. Whiskey spirals are very efficient. They soak up whiskey and liquor really nice. You can even buy some online that are pre-soaked with different types of cognac or whatever. I'm going to turn this boil down just a little bit. Slammy Reed, do you need to soak your chips in something before adding to your beer? No. Well, in liquor, otherwise you should just at least boil them for a little bit or steam them to sanitize them. But if you want to soak them in liquor, which, I mean, if you're going to add oak to beer, you might as well add a little whiskey or something too, in my opinion. But I personally like that. If you don't like the whiskey, you can omit it. Just soak them in boiling water and then add them to it right away, right after they've been boiled. Otherwise, whiskey, vodka, gin, I mean, all that stuff kills any bacteria anyway, so you don't need to sanitize if you're using liquor. There are 3 main types of oak people use. There's American, French, and Hungarian oak. American oak, which is going to be the most common, is going to be campfire, coffee-like, the medium toast. French oak is going to have a little more sweeter, spicy kind of tannins and phenols and such coming out of it. A little more fruity. And then Hungarian will be a little more peppery and chocolatey. So, I mean, they're all oak, but because of the regions they're from, they're different types of oak, and they have different types of flavors that come out of them. Hungarian, I believe, is the most expensive, then French, and then American is the cheapest, obviously because it's domestic. Again, you can soak them in wine, whiskey, rum, tequila, gin, whatever you want. Soaking it for at least 2 or 3 weeks is going to be best. As it soaks, you may see some of the liquors kind of going down. Oh, again, you want to keep it covered. Keep it covered because otherwise it's just going to evaporate out. Like I have on this, I have a nice tight lid that's covered. It will soak up all of the liquor. You may need to add a little bit more. you know, you can't really add too much as long as they're covered or they're completely soaked. And these have stayed wet for, I mean, I've had these for months, literally months, so they're still good to go. In fact, I think I've had those over a year. But I made a big batch of them and just been using a little bit at a time. Okay, so we've been about 10 minutes on that boil, so let's go ahead and turn the heat off. And we're going to get our other thing of hops here. Before I add these hops, I'm going to start putting the malt in there, because this is a late addition hop and I don't want it to sit in the hot wort for too long, add too much bitterness. Although with aging, all that bitterness will fall out over time, so I guess it doesn't really matter. All right, so we've turned the heat off on there, and I'm going to start with the soft packs. Sanitize our scissors. Okay, and when you've done that 10-minute boil, if depending on the size of your pot, it could evaporate a little bit more water than normal, so it won't hurt to add an extra cup if you need to the boil to make up for evaporation. Looks like mine did okay, so I'm not too worried about it becoming too sludgy when I add all this malt. Again, this is going to be 8 cups of water instead of the normal 4. Do you need to soak your chips in something before? Oh, I already read that one. Okay. And now all of the LMEs in this are smooth instead of robust, which is the darkest one. The grains add plenty of darkness, plus you have the 2 cans of St. Patrick's that are stout. So there's no need to use the robust, because that's just going to add more unnecessary, bitterness from the dark grains. Smooth, however, is going to have more toffee notes, more caramel. So this is going to bring out a lot of flavor in the beer. So there's a kind of a balance between caramel, malt, and malt sweetness, and the bitterness from the roast. Another one. Oh, that one almost came right off. There we go. Okay. Another option for wood is just to get a barrel. Sometimes you can find little 5-gallon barrels. I think you can even find little 2 or 3-gallon barrels if you're lucky. We actually have 2 55-gallon barrels in our warehouse here at Mr.Beer that we're going to be using with the Tucson Homebrew Club. We're going to put together a recipe, and everybody's going to brew a 5-gallon batch of it, and then we're going to throw it all in and let it age for a year, and then tap it a year later. Everybody gets their 5 gallons or 10 gallons, however much they contributed out of it. And it should be fun. It looks like that label wants to come off, so I'm going to go ahead and peel that, otherwise that will make a mess. Okay. Get our sanitized can opener. Again, I did a 6-gallon batch of this, and man, my hands were tired after opening and squeezing all those LMEs and all the cans of extract. But boy, was it worth it. It was a really good recipe. Smells so good. roasty, almost like coffee. Oh, and you can add coffee to this if you'd like. You can add vanilla. You can turn this into a milk stout. I would add probably ½ pound of lactose sugar to it. Anywhere from 4 ounces to 8 ounces of lactose sugar, vanilla bean, maybe a little coffee, maybe some toasted almonds, some coconut, some dry flaked coconut. Oh man, so many good ideas. And final can. All right. Oh yeah, that stuff pours right out when it's nice and warm. Otherwise it's like molasses. Ooh, that's another thing you could add to this. About a tablespoon of molasses, maybe a little brown sugar.
Maple syrup.
Yep, some maple syrup. Some honey. Ooh, some peanut butter. If you're gonna use peanut butter, I've had there's really great peanut butter stouts and porters on the market. Unfortunately, peanut butter is really oily and fatty, so it can kill your head. But there's a product called PB2. PB2 Fit is the best version of it because it has less fat. It's a dry peanut butter. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. If not, you can find it at most stores. And it works really great because it has had all the fats and a lot of the oils already removed. Okay, and so I'm going to kind of use that hop sack in here as a little mop to mop up all that malt on the bottom. Just want to keep stirring this until that spoon is clean. Still quite syrupy. And as far as you know, when you're soaking your chips or your oak or whatever you're using, quality of the whiskey really doesn't matter. My rule of thumb is don't use something you wouldn't drink on its own, but there's no reason to waste money on like a 30-year-old scotch or something like that for this recipe. Use something moderately priced that's good, decent. But if you do have a 30-year-old scotch lying around and you don't mind using a few ounces of it, go for it. In fact, I've thought about using something like Lagavulin or Laphroaig, which are both peat smoked scotches, and I think that would add a nice character to a stout or porter like this. Okay, it's coming up fairly clean. You want to scrape your spoon along the bottom a little bit too. Make sure it's coming off clean so there's no malt down there. Again, use that hop sack in there as a little mop. All right, we're looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and start getting my water ready. I'll go ahead and use the overhead cam for this. You guys can see a little better. Grab my pre-sanitized funnel. I'm gonna throw a little more star sand on there just to sanitize it further. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do, I'll do the water first. So I'm going to do 1 gallon of cold refrigerated water. You want to use cold refrigerated water because you need the hot wort to equalize out to about 65-70 degrees for your yeast pitch. If it's too warm, you may get off flavors from the yeast. So cold refrigerated water. Below 42 degrees is best. Most refrigerators are about 38 to 40. And it's really important with this recipe, especially because it has 8 cups of water instead of 4. So it's going to have a larger volume of hot wort. So the colder the better, even if it's close to freezing, is best. And that should equalize you out to about 60, 65 degrees. If you get lower, that's fine. If you're like 55 degrees, that's totally fine. You just don't want to go above 75 typically. Some yeast strains can handle that temperature, but the Cooper's yeast, it's really best to try to get it as cool as possible. You know what? First, I need to put the hops in here. Okay, so we're gonna bring our wort over, and with my sanitized tongs, I'm gonna fish out. Where is it at? There it is. And I'm just gonna very carefully put the hop sack in there, and I'm gonna go ahead and add the second one in there as well, and pour the wort on top. Go ahead and put a little bit of water in here. Rinse it. Because this is a pretty highly concentrated wort, so some of it will stick behind a little bit. Okay. Alright, we're going to go ahead and top this off to the number 2 mark on the back. Again, if you're using one of the older kegs, it'll be an 8 quart or 8.5 liter mark. Let's get that hop sack in there submerged. Okay, so we're already almost at the number 2 mark. If it is too warm, your wort at this point, you can put the lid on, put it in a sink, and just surround it in an ice bath, and it should cool down in about 10 minutes. Okay, Dirtbag Triple O. Do you use tap water or bottled water when you fill the LBK? Thank you for bringing that up. I totally forgot about the water. So we're using tap water, but our tap water is filtered. The basic rule of thumb is if your water tastes good to you, it's usually going to taste good in your beer. If it has any type of chemical flavors like chlorine, chlorinase, things like that, kind of chemically or plasticky, you probably want to use a bottled water. Purified water or spring water is best. Try to avoid distilled water because it lacks minerals that are crucial for yeast health. So yeah, just try to use purified water. If your tap water is fine, that's fine. If you have no other option and your tap water smells and tastes like chlorine, you have no stores near you for some reason, you can go ahead and boil, your 2.5 gallons in advance, and then refrigerate them. Because boiling will usually boil off that chlorine. Be sure you're boiling with no lid on the pot. You want to keep the lid off so that evaporates out. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and give this a nice little stir. And just to be sure, I'm gonna check my temperature. Sometimes with these ones you do need an ice bath with those 8-cup batches. And yeah, we're a little bit about 80 degrees. Fortunately, this Nottingham yeast, you can pitch at about 86 to 90. Yeah, you can pitch up to 92 degrees on this stuff. So yeah, we'll go ahead and pitch it. Normally though, if you're using any other yeast or you really want to get prevent any off flavors, try to get it down to about 75 or below. But this is good enough for this particular yeast. And it does say on the back to rehydrate before use. I've never had to because we're doing 2-gallon batches and these are good for up to 6 gallons. There's really no need to rehydrate it. It will rehydrate in the wort. And you can either use half, or you can, I just use the whole thing. Give a nice healthy starting fermentation. No need to really stir at this point. Yeast will find the sugars, and you want to keep them to have access to oxygen for the first 24-48 hours or so. Okay, and does anybody have any questions about using wood in beer? And you know, you don't have to do this just for stouts either. You know, you can use wood in porter. You can use wood. Wood is great in saisons. You know, try soaking a really good wine, or a decent wine, in your wood for a few weeks, and then put a saison on top of that. Oh, and as far as when the wood goes in, so we're going to ferment this for a week or two. The recipe instructions say 2 weeks, and then a week before bottling, add your oak chips. If you're using cubes or another thing, then you'll want to add them a week after fermentation, 2 weeks before bottling. You can do the same with your chips if you want a more forward oak flavor. Do 2 weeks before bottling instead of 1 week. But typically, the way I do it with oak chips, because they soak the liquor up so fast, usually in a week or two, you don't have to really let them sit like cubes for 3 weeks or more. So what I do is I start the soaking at the beginning of the fermentation process, and then as soon as I'm ready to add those, they should be fully soaked with whiskey, or gin, or tequila, again, whatever you're using. I've seen wood being used in pale ales. I've seen wood even being used in IPAs. I've had some interesting IPAs where some of the citrusy notes of the hops worked well with some of the vanilla notes out of the wood. And by the way, wood has, I think it's over 200 different forms of vanillin, which is the flavor compound that creates the vanilla flavor. So you can get a lot of different types of notes. There's hundreds of different types of tannins, phenols, and other things inside of wood. Oak is the most common because commonly used because it has the most amount of these flavor components. But again, you can also use cherry wood, apple wood, smoked apple wood. You can use mesquite is a really great one. Again, these should be toasted. Another thing you can do is smoke your wood like you would smoke chips for a campfire. Last night, actually, I went to the Tucson Homebrew Club meeting and had a cider that was brewed with smoked wood, and I thought it was pretty interesting. It was really good. So I mean, there's so many different ways you can use wood in beer, and again, it's becoming more and more popular to use wood in beer. People are barrel aging all kinds of stuff like quads and doubles and triples and pretty much anything you can think of. There are even barrel aged Brett IPAs. And I know it's kind of counterintuitive to age an IPA because the hop oils dissipate over time and they're supposed to be fresh. But the thing is, Brettanomyces, which most of these IPAs are aged with, is an oxygen scrubber, and it's a antioxidant basically, and it will protect the hop oils. So you can actually age an IPA with Brett, and those hop oils will still remain for a year or more. So that's a pretty interesting fact about those. But looks like we're getting close to the end here, so start getting out those questions if you have any. And by the way, we're going to be doing 2 streams per week instead of 3 like we've been doing. We've been doing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. From this point going forward, we're just going to be doing Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So Tuesday is going to be mostly just kind of a beginner, and then Wednesday is going to be intermediate advanced. But I mean, we're probably just going to drop those whole monikers altogether and just have a Tuesday show, Wednesday show. Because we found that a lot of this stuff kind of blurs together anyway, like the kegging we had for an advanced show, even though that can be used by beginners. And I know a lot of beginners will want to be interested in other, advanced techniques and things like that. And even some advanced guys like to see, go back to basics and see some of the beginner stuff. So so that's what we're gonna be doing. This is because we don't want to run out of too much material too fast, and also just having 2 instead of 3 shows per week will help us kind of ramp up the quality of the 2 shows we're gonna be doing as well. So if you guys are new to Twitch TV, if you look at the very top, there's a follow button. If you press that follow button, you'll get an email each time we go live, usually, which is about what is it, 10 to 15 minutes before,
I
Matt?
think it's only 5 now.
Oh, it's only 5 minutes before. You'll be notified when we're about to go live. And if you hit the subscribe button, if you're a Amazon Prime member, then you can link your Twitch account and you'll be a Twitch Prime member where you can get 1 free subscription each month. Otherwise, it's $4.99. We don't make any money off of that. Any money that goes to the subscription or to the bits goes to the Southern Arizona Humane Society. So that's for a good cause. And the bits, if you get bits and send us cheers, if you kind of click down on the cheers, it'll kind of explain that for you. It'll give you extra emojis you can use in the chat, things like that. I mean, nothing major. We might have more perks for you guys later on for things like that. But if you scroll down below the screen, you'll see our community. If you click on community, that takes you to our forum. And we have hundreds and hundreds, I mean thousands of members. We have several members that are very active on there. There are constantly conversations going on daily about our Mr.Beer kits, and not just our Mr.Beer kits. I mean, these guys talk about all grain brewing, advanced techniques, all kinds of different stuff. It's a really, really great resource to check out. All the guys are really friendly on there, very helpful, and a lot of them like to come into the stream and check us out too. So they're usually pretty helpful in chat as well. All right, well, I think, let me get this, my scroll is not working. There we go. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and close out this show. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We will see you again Tuesday. Not sure what we're doing. It's going to be another beginner or intermediate show, and then we'll have something for you on Wednesday too, probably a little more advanced. If you guys want to check out this recipe, it's on our website. I recommend picking it up and brewing it now if you want to have it ready for the holidays. It makes a really great gift. You know, the swing top bottles are really great for this beer. So yeah, I think that's it. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we will see you on Tuesday. Cheers.